Balak's messengers to Balaam. Balak now sent messengers to Balaam with the following message. Do not think I ask your help against Israel exclusively in my own interest, or that you can expect from me alone honor and rewards for your service, but rest assured that all nations will then honor you, and that Canaanites as well as Egyptians will cast themselves at your feet when you have destroyed Israel. This people that has gone out of Egypt has buried Sihon and Og, the eyes that guarded the whole land, and now they are about to destroy us as well. They are not indeed greater heroes than we, nor is their host more numerous than ours, but they conquer as soon as they open their lips in prayer, and that we cannot do. Try now to see if I may not gradually become their master, so that at least I can lead a certain percentage of them to destruction, be it only a 24th part of them. Balak himself was an even greater magician and soothsayer than Balaam, but he lacked the gift of properly grasping prophetic observations. He knew through his sorcery that he was to be the cause of death of 24,000 Israelites, but he did not know in which way Israel was to suffer such a great loss. Hence he requested Balaam to curse Israel, hoping by this curse to be able to restrain Israel from entering the Holy Land. Balak's messengers to Balaam consisted of the elders of Moab and Midian. The latter were themselves great magicians, and they could discover the truth, that should Balaam obey Balak's summons, their mission against Israel would be successful. But should he hesitate even for a moment to follow them, nothing was to be expected from him. When they reached Balaam, and he told them to stay overnight and await his answer, the elders of Midian instantly returned, for they knew then that they had nothing to expect from him. They said, Is there such a father that hates his son? God is the father of Israel. He loves them. Will he now, owing to a curse from Balaam, turn his love into hatred? Indeed, had the matter depended on Balaam's wishes, he would doubtless instantly have acquiesced and followed Balak's summons, for he hated Israel more than Balak, and was much pleased with the commission of the Moabite king. The elders that Balak had sent had in their possession all needful instruments of magic, so that Balaam would have no excuse for not instantly following them. But Balaam had to bide his time, and first find out if God would permit him to go over to Balak. Hence he told the Moabite messengers to stay overnight, because God never appears to heathen prophets except at night. As Balaam expected, God appeared by night and asked Balaam, Who are these people with you? Balaam was one of the 3 men who God put to the test and who miserably failed to pass it. When God appeared to Cain and asked, Where is Abel your brother? He tried to deceive God. He should have replied, Lord of the world, what is hidden and what is open, both are alike and known to you. Why then do you inquire after my brother? But instead of this he replied, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? God therefore said to him, You have spoken your own sentence. The voice of your brother's blood cries to me from the ground, and now you are cursed. Hezekiah acted like Cain when the messengers from the king of Babylon came to him, and later Isaiah the prophet asked him, What did these men say, and where did they come from? Hezekiah should have answered, You are a prophet of God. Why do you ask me? But instead of giving this answer, he replied haughtily and boastfully, They came from a far country to see me, all the way from Babylon. On account of this haughty answer, Isaiah announced to the king this prophecy, Behold, the days come that all that is in your house will be carried to Babylon, and your sons will be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. The scoundrel Balaam, too, should have made answer to God's question, Who are these people with you? By saying, Lord of the world, everything lies open before you, and nothing is hidden from you. Why do you ask me? But he, on the other hand, made quite a different answer and started to boast to God, saying, Although you do not distinguish me and do not spread my fame over the world, still the kings seek me. Balak, the king of Moab, has sent to ask me to curse Israel. Then God said, Because you speak so, you will not curse the people, and added, "You wicked rascal! I said of Israel, 'He that harms them harms the apple of my eye.' And yet you wish to harm them and curse them. Therefore your eye will be blinded." Thus Balaam became blind of one eye, as he had already been lame of one foot. Balaam, now perceiving that God did not wish him to curse Israel, said, "If it be so, then I will bless them." God: "They have no need of your blessing, for they are blessed." God said to Balaam as one says to a bee, "I'll take neither your honey nor your sting." Balaam accepts Balak's invitation. On the following morning, Balaam gave the elders of Moab his answer, saying that he would not follow Balak's call, that God had forbidden him to curse Israel. He said instead, "God said to me, 'Do not go with these men, for that would be beneath your dignity, but wait for nobler ambassadors.'" Balaam's plan was to insult Balak, so that he would send no further messengers, and no one might discover that he could accomplish nothing beyond the word of God. His expectations, in turn, were disappointed. The ambassadors, in their turn, not quite painstaking in their telling of the truth, told the king that Balaam considered it beneath his dignity to appear in their escort, making no mention of God, but speaking as if the refusal came simply and exclusively from Balaam. Balak then sent more honorable ambassadors to Balaam, until he was at last obliged to admit that he could undertake nothing against God's command. Even then, it is true, he did not admit that his acceptance or refusal of Balak's invitation depended entirely on God, but declared he could, if he wished, do as he chose. But he did not choose to transgress God's prohibition. In his second message, Balak promised Balaam more for his service than he had offered him the first time. Balaam's answer was as follows: "Even if Balak gave me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord my God." These words characterized the man, who had three bad qualities: a jealous eye, a haughty spirit, and a greedy soul. His jealousy was the reason why he wanted to curse Israel, who he envied for their good fortune. In his haughtiness, he told the first messengers the falsehood that God would not let him go with them because it would be beneath his dignity. And his avarice was expressed in mentioning Balak's gold and silver, but spoke his mind by explaining to them that their master could not adequately compensate him for his service, saying, "If Balak were to hire armies against Israel, his success would still be in doubt, whereas he could be certain of success if he hired me." He did not, however, give the second messengers a decisive answer, but said to them also, "I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more. Now therefore, I pray you, wait here this night, that I may know more of what the Lord will speak to me." These words held unconscious prophecies. "I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord" was as much as to say that he could not cancel the blessings of God to Israel. "Wait here this night" contained the prophecy that this second embassy would be as much disappointed as the first. For, although Balaam accompanied the second messengers, he still had no power to curse Israel, but only to bless them. Finally, the words, "What more the Lord will speak to me," held a prediction that God would bestow even more benedictions on the Israelites through him. God permits man to go on the way he chooses to go. When God appeared to Balaam the first time, he said to him, "You will not go with them." But when Balaam still did not relinquish his desire to go to Balak, God would not interfere. Hence, at his second appearance, God said to Balaam, "If the men come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you will you do." Audacity prevails even before God. Balaam's steadfast insistence on his wish wrested from God his consent to Balaam's journey to Moab. He warned him of his consequences, saying, "I take no pleasure in the destruction of sinners, but if you are bound to go to your destruction, do so. Whoever leads righteous men astray on an evil way will fall into the ditch of his own digging." Balaam was misled by God's behavior toward him and thus plunged into destruction. When God first appeared to him and asked him, "Who are these men with you?" this blasphemer thought, God does not know them. It seems clear that there are times when he is not aware of what goes on, and I will be able to do with his children as I wish. Balaam was misled by God because he had with his words seduced to unchastity people who had up to that time lived in purity. God's apparent change of decision that first prohibited him from going to Balak and then permitted him to do so completely bewildered him, so that he thought, God at first said to me, "Do not go with them." But the second time he said, "Go with them." So he will change his words, "curse them not," into "curse them." Just as Balaam was confused by God, so too were the magicians that Balak sent to him. On the first visit, they thought their magic lure established that he would accept Balak's invitation, but God made him decline. The second time, they figured he would not accept the invitation, but God made him obey their summons. Balaam's ass. Balaam could hardly wait for morning, rejoicing no less than Balak's messengers at God's consent to his journey to Balak, and he was still hoping he might succeed in bringing disaster on Israel. In his haste to set out, he himself saddled his ass, although he did not lack servants. Then God said, "You villain! Their ancestor Abraham preceded you, for he too rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, to lead Isaac to sacrifice in fulfillment of the command that had reached him." The ass that Balaam took with him had been created on the 6th day of creation. He had received it as a gift from Jacob, that he might not give evil counsel to Pharaoh concerning Jacob's children. It was on his advice, nevertheless, that Pharaoh forced the Israelites to make bricks. He also took his 2 sons, Janes and Jambres, for it behooves a noble man always to have at least 2 companions on any journey that he undertakes. Although God had now granted him permission to go on the journey, still God's wrath was kindled when he set out. He said, "Behold this man, he knows that I read each man's heart, and knows also that he departs only to curse Israel." This wickedness on Balaam's part had the result that even the angel of mercy turned against him, standing in his way. At first the ass alone perceived the angel, and not Balaam. For God has so arranged it that human beings may not perceive the angels that surround them, or else they would, through terror, lose their reason. The ass, on the other hand, instantly perceived the angel. He at first stood in her way as she was in the middle of the road, so that she could turn aside on both sides. Then she perceived him when the road narrowed, and she could turn to one side only, and finally she reached a spot where there was no road at all, to which she could turn either on this side or on that. This was to teach Balaam the following lesson. If he wanted to curse Abraham's children, he should have leeway on both sides, Ishmael's children and Keturah's children. If he wanted to curse Isaac's children, one side would still be open to him, Esau's children. But if he wanted to curse Jacob's children, he should never bring it to pass, for they are protected on both sides, on the one hand by Abraham and Isaac, on the other by Jacob and Levi, while God watches them from above. The wall on this side and that side, through which place he had to pass, were furthermore to indicate to him that he could not become master over Israel, who have in their possession the tablets of the law, that were written on both sides. When the ass reached the wall that Jacob and Laban had erected as a token that no one would pass over it to harm Israel, she thrust her feet against it and came to a stop, to punish Balaam for having broken his agreement with Jacob. Balaam, who had with blows attempted to make the ass walk straight, now flew into a rage when she lay down altogether and would not budge from the spot, so that he struck her all the more. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the ass and permitted her to use speech, a gift she had possessed ever since her creation, but had not used until then. She said, "What have I done to you that you have hit me these 3 times?" The first words of the ass were so chosen as to call Balaam's attention to the wickedness and uselessness of his undertaking against Israel. 3 times was to remind him that he wished to curse a nation that 3 times every year arranged pilgrimages to the Lord. The ass's speech was altogether to serve as a warning to Balaam to beware of his mouth and not curse Israel. The ass, through her speaking, was to instruct him that the mouth and tongue are in God's hand. Balaam answered the ass in the language which she had addressed him, in Hebrew, which he did not, however, speak fluently. He said, "Because you mock me, I wish there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you." The ass then replied, "You cannot kill me except with a sword. How then will you destroy an entire nation with your mouth?" Balaam was silent, knowing no reply. The ass did not only make him ridiculous in the eyes of the elders of Moab that accompanied him, but she also exposed him as a liar. For when the ambassadors asked him why he had not chosen a horse rather than an ass for his journey, he answered that his saddle horse was in the pasture. Then the ass interrupted him, saying, "Am I not your ass on which you have ridden all your life?" Balaam, "I use you as a beast of burden, but not for the saddle." The ass, "No, on me you have ridden since your earliest days, and you have always treated me with as much affection as a man treats his wife." Balaam now had to admit that the ass had spoken the truth. Balak's princes were much amazed at this extraordinary miracle, but the ass died the moment she had spoken what she had to say. God did this for 2 reasons. First, because he feared that the heathens might worship this ass were she to stay alive, and second, because God wanted to spare Balaam the disgrace of having people point to his ass and say, "This is she that bested Balaam in an argument." By this action it can be seen how highly God prizes the honor of pious men, for he even sought to spare the honor of this villain. It is out of consideration to mankind also that God has closed the mouth of animals, for were they to speak, man could not well use them for his service, since the ass, the most stupid of all animals, when she spoke, confounded Balaam, the wisest of the wise. Balaam runs to his own destruction. While all this was going on, Balaam still did not perceive that God's angel stood before him. God meant to show him that in his hand is not only the tongue of man, but his eye as well, so that as long as he chooses, man will fail to see what is directly before his nose. But God suddenly permitted Balaam to see the angel with a sword drawn in his hand, and Balaam fell flat on his face, for, being uncircumcised, Balaam might not listen to the words of God or of an angel standing erect. Hence, on perceiving the angel, who instantly began to address him, Balaam cast himself on the ground. The sword in the angel's hand did not signify that he meant to strike Balaam, for a breath from his mouth would suffice to kill myriads, but it was to point out the following truth to Balaam. The mouth was given to Jacob, but to Esau and to the other nations the sword. You are about to change your profession and go out against Israel with his own weapon, and therefore you will find death through the sword rather than your own weapon, the mouth. The angel now said to Balaam, "If I have been commissioned to demand restitution from you for the injustice you have offered the ass, who can show neither meritorious deeds of her own nor of her father's, how much more must I stand as the avenger of an entire nation, who have their own merits, and can also refer to the merits of their fathers? But to return to the ass, why did you hit her, that turned from the road only because she saw me and was frightened?" Balaam was a shrewd sinner, for he knew that divine punishment could be averted only by penitence, and that the angels have no power to touch a man who, after sinning, says, "I have sinned." Hence he said to the angel, "I have sinned," but added, "I did not set out until God said to me, 'Rise up and go with them,' and now you say to me, 'Return.' But this is the Lord's way. Did he not also first tell Abraham to sacrifice his son, and then he caused an angel to call out to him, 'Lay not your hand on the boy'? It is his custom first to give a command, and then through an angel to recall it. So also he indeed said to me, Go with them, but if it displeases you, I will turn back. The angel replied, All that I have done was to your advantage, but if you are bound to plunge into destruction, do so. Go with these people, but destruction is decreed for all of you. Think not, however, that you will do as you think, for you will say what I desire you to say, and you will refrain from saying what I wish to remain unsaid. In spite of the warnings he received from God and the angel, he would not refrain from taking this fatal step. But in his hatred towards Israel, he still cherished the hope that he could succeed in obtaining God's consent to curse Israel, and he continued on his journey in his happy expectation. Balaam with Balak. When God wishes to humble an evildoer, he at first exalts him, to fill him with pride. So too he humbled Balaam after exalting him. For at first Balak had sent princes of little distinction to him, and God said, You will not go with them. When, however, he sent many renowned princes, God said to Balaam, Go with them. But this journey brought him nothing but humiliation and ruin. For he fared in accordance with the proverb, Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. God does this so that men might not say, Who has God destroyed? Surely not that insignificant person. So God exalts sinners before their fall. When Balaam approached the Moabite boundaries, he sent messengers to Balak to announce his arrival, and Balak came out to his country's border to meet him. Pointing to the boundary lines, Balak said to Balaam, These have been fixed since Noah's days, that no nation might push into the realm of another. But Israel set out to destroy the boundaries, as their attitude towards Sihon and Og shows, into whose kingdoms they entered. He then greeted him with the words, Did I not twice send for you? Why then did you not come? Am I not able to promote you to great honor? Balak unconsciously uttered a prophecy, for in truth Balaam came in disgrace, not covered with glory, as he could not fulfill Balak's wish to curse Israel. It should now have been Balak's duty, had he really desired to be of service to the king of Moab, to say to him, Why do you attempt to do what will bring you misfortune, and finally your ruin? But he spoke quite differently instead, boastfully bragging of his gift of prophecy, pointing out that he was the last prophet among the heathens. And, he continued, I, the last prophet among the heathens, will counsel you. The ancestor of Israel erected to God an altar, on which 3 times annually he offered up 7 oxen and 7 rams. So you then must erect 7 altars, and offer up 7 oxen and 7 rams. God laughed when he heard this counsel, saying, Every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine, and all its fullness. Will I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? Balak led his guest from the border to the interior of the land, taking pains to show him great multitudes of the people, having bazaars erected for that purpose. Pointing to these multitudes, among which there were many children, Balak said, Look now, Israel plans to destroy these multitudes that have done them no injury. Balak slaughtered for Balaam's welcome 1 ox and 1 sheep, proving the proverb, The pious promise little and do much, the wicked promise much and do little. Balak had sent word to Balaam, saying, I will promote you to very great honor. Yet when he arrived, he offered him only 1 ox and 1 sheep. Suppressing his rage, Balaam thought, Is that all he offers me? He will have to pay for this tomorrow. For he instantly determined to have him offer up many sacrifices on the following day, to punish him for having treated him in so miserly a fashion. Balaam's sacrifices refused. On the following morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him to the high places of Baal, for Balak was even a greater magician and soothsayer than Balaam, who allowed himself like a blind man to be led by Balak. He led him to this spot because through his magic lore he knew that Israel was to suffer a great misfortune on the heights of Baal Peor, and he thought it would be Balaam's curse that would effect this disaster on them. The relation of these two men to each other was like that between two men, one of whom has a knife in his hand but does not know what part of the body to strike for slaughter, and the other knows the part of the body but has no knife. Balak knew the place where disaster awaited Israel, but did not know how it was to be brought about, whereas Balaam knew how evil is conjured up, but did not know the places set for disaster, to which Balak had led him. Balaam's superiority over Balak and the other magicians lay in this, that he could accurately determine the moment in which God is wrathful, and it was for this reason that his curse was always effective, because he knew how to curse at the very instant of God's anger. It is true that God is angry for only one instant every day, to wit, during the third hour of the day, when the kings with crowns on their heads worship the sun. But this moment is of infinitely short duration. Fully 85,088 such moments make an hour, so that no mortal except Balaam had ever been able to fix that moment, although this point of time has its outward manifestations in nature. For, while it lasts, the rooster's comb becomes absolutely white, without even the smallest stripe of red. God's love for Israel, however, is so great that during the time that Balaam prepared to curse Israel, he did not wax angry at all, so that Balaam waited in vain for the moment of wrath. Balaam now tried to obtain God's consent for Israel's curse through sacrifices, and so told Balak to erect 7 altars on the high place of Baal, corresponding to the 7 altars that since Adam had been erected by 7 pious men, to wit, Adam, Abel, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. When the altars had been erected, Balaam said to God, "Why did you favor these people, if not for the sacrifice that they offered? Would it not be better for you to be adored by 70 nations than by one?" But the Holy Spirit answered, "Better is a dry morsel and quietness than a house full of sacrifices and strife. Dearer to me is a dry offering of meal rather than these many flesh offerings by which you try to stir up strife between me and Israel." Now Balaam's fate was decided, for by his conduct he put himself into direct opposition to God, and so his destruction was decreed. And from that moment the Holy Spirit of prophecy left him, and he was nothing more than a magician. For Israel's sake, however, God granted him the honor of his revelation, but he did so grudgingly, as one loathes to touch an unclean thing. Hence he would not permit Balaam to come to him, but rather he appeared to Balaam. God's different treatment of Balaam and Moses at the revelation is evident, for whereas the latter went to the sanctuary to hear God's words, the former received God's revelation at any place whatsoever. This example characterizes God's attitude toward them. 2 men once knocked at a noble's door, the one being a friend who had a request to make, and the other a leprous beggar. The noble said, "Let my friend enter, but I will send the beggar's alms to the door, that he may not enter and pollute my palace." God called Moses to him, whereas he did not want Balaam to come to him, but he went there. He found Balaam at the 7 altars that he had erected, and said to him, "What are you doing here?" Then Balaam answered, "I have erected for you as many altars as the fathers of Israel, and I have offered on them bulls and rams." God, however, said to him, "Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than an ox and hatred on the side. More pleasant to me is a meal of unleavened bread and herbs that the Israelites took in Egypt than the bulls that you offer out of hatred. You knave! If I wished for offerings, I would order Michael and Gabriel to bring them to me. You are mistaken if you believe I will accept offerings from the nation of the world, for I have vowed to accept such from Israel alone." God then handed him over to an angel, who entered and settled in his throat, and would not permit Balaam to speak when he wanted to curse Israel. Next, Balaam extols Israel. End part 67 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.